Doctors of Reddit, what's the biggest case of faking it you've ever seen? Young, 18 to 20, woman went running into small rural hospital pretending to have abdominal pain. Police officer had tagged her going 40 plus km over the limit, which was "stunt driving" as per the new law in Ontario. Impound and license suspension automatic. Cop followed her into and apparently said he'd be waiting for her when she left. Locum staff such as myself were housed at a small B&B about 15 minutes away, and the had pre-printed order sets to be done before we arrived. When I arrived she flat out admitted that she just came in because she freaked out and didn't stop. I told her we'd give her 45 minutes to call her parents/family before I booted her. Except BHCG came back positive and subsequent ultrasound came back showing extremely early ectopic. Officer figures out something is up when he hears air ambulance call coming over radio. She was completely asymptomatic and just worked out that she dodged both charges and a life-threatening issue by accident. It was definitely a WTF moment. Obligatory, not a doctor. I was an EMT and had a frequent flyer who rotated through various chief complaints, one which was complete blindness, emphasis on complete. We did our duty, of course, got him on board, took vitals, bussed him to the nearest hospital. But we occasionally had a bit of fun with him. One of the blindness calls, we noted that he walked a rather narrow and windy path from his trailer to the rig without any issue. Once on board the rig, when asked for his insurance card, he fingered through his wallet and fetched it from among a mass of cards without issue. When asked direct questions, he met our gaze and followed it when our heads moved. When I pointed all this out to him, his only response was to quickly look at something over my shoulder and stammer through, "And no, I'm blind." Okay, our mistake then. Off we go. This patient comes in for back pain with weakness of the legs. Gets a full workup with MRI, standard blood work, and then some immunological things to look for stuff like myasthenia gravis. No neurological or immunological explanation for the weakness. Patient is seen by physical therapy and they are of the opinion that the patient is holding back intentionally. Go to see the patient at the end of the day and prep them for discharge. Patient is infuriated that they are being discharged, yelling and screaming about how they aren't better, how they are disappointed in the institution, blah blah blah. They said one particular thing that still clearly stands out 3 to 4 years later. "I can't believe you're sending me home already. I haven't even told my family I'm here, and now you're going to send me home before they even have the chance to see me." My attending and I leave the room to arrange things with the nurses. We go back in, and the patient is out of bed and standing up in the middle of the room. Miraculously the patient is able to walk with zero assistance when they had so much difficulty with any assistance over the previous 2 days. At that point, they were enraged. We went into the room without knocking. They were discharged home after a conversation regarding abuse of medical services. Not a doctor, but am a UK-based midwife. Had a patient who had been in and out of hospital throughout her pregnancy with episodes of heavy bleeding. This was her 6th baby, so she was a fairly well-known patient in our unit. The issue was no one had ever seen her actively bleeding. She'd call saying that she had bled down the toilet but flushed it, and all the examinations we did came back completely normal with mostly no evidence of any bleed whatsoever. On occasions during speculum examinations we'd see the smallest amount of blood. I was caring for her during a shift where she yet again called to say she was bleeding, walked into her room, and found her jabbing around her vagina with a sharp object to make herself bleed. She had been doing it the entire pregnancy. The reason she gave, because she had 5 noisy children at home, needed some rest, and knew we wouldn't admit her to hospital if it wasn't for a good reason. She would do it any time her being discharged home was mentioned. We ended up having to complete a perinatal mental health referral and consult with the safeguarding midwives as she was putting herself and baby at risk of serious harm. Edit. So this got a lot more attention than I ever expected. There's a lot of questions regarding birth control and questioning her parenting, so thought it best to add an edit. This patient was not by any means a benefits seeker. They were a hard-working and loving family that had full-time jobs. She had been booked in to have her tubes tied, but found out a week before the procedure that she was pregnant with this baby. She just couldn't cope during the pregnancy and became very mentally unwell. She did not realize the implications or understand the face that she was causing massive harm to herself and her baby. She was referred to our perinatal mental health team and treated for psychosis. They also had a lot of input after she had her baby. She ended up having a C-section and was sterilized at the same time at her request. By all accounts she is doing very well now. Also thank you very much for the slivers. Years ago I had a patient who had been rear-ended in an auto accident a few weeks before I saw her. She had a history of lupus. She was decked out in the usual Lyme crippled paraphernalia, crutches, neck brace, elbow braces, wrist braces, knee braces, and could barely walk. I saw her a couple of times and she showed no improvement. One Saturday I was on call, but had to take a backstreets route to the hospital because of an event taking place on the main thoroughfare. I apparently drove through her neighborhood because, wonders behold, there she was wearing old lady spandex power walking down the sidewalk, holding weights in both hands. I did not call out to her. Next week, she was back in clinic with her I'm crippled jet up on again. A few weeks later I got the subpoena for the deposition, and it all became clear. I had a patient when I worked in a ICU that was sedated and on a vent. A family member showed up out of nowhere and was staying day and night. I got pretty suspicious of them because they were clearly lying about knowing this person. Just talked to the fake family member about how it must have been sad since they just celebrated their birthday a week or so before getting ill. This person said it was a wonderful party and such, to which I replied their birthday hadn't occurred yet and wasn't for months. Turned out when security came it was a homeless person who snuck in and found a room with a sedated patient and decided to make it a place to stay. Needless to say security to enter the ICU was absolute shit. 4th year medical student. On my rotation and a trauma came in from a woman that had been arrested. During the drive the patient banged her head 4 times against the window of the police car and then went unresponsive. She came to us with a bruise over her forehead and unresponsive. We all smelled BS, but the patient was a great actor, didn't even flinch during the digital rectal exam, which is standard for all patients that come in through the trauma bay, though some of the nurses said that they caught her peeking at us when would leave the room. We ended up getting a CORT scan, which was normal, and was even considering intubating her to secure her airway when our attending finally walked over to her, opened her eyelids, and held them open while telling her to wake up. Finally she started fighting to close her eyes and the jig was up. The doctor called her out and she proceeded to start screaming at us. She was much more pleasant when she was pretending to have a brain injury. My cousin got glasses. Her 7-year-old little sister also wanted glasses because she thought it was so cool to wear them. So she started telling her teachers she couldn't read what was on the chalkboard. And she'd squint at home and go incredibly close to the TV to watch things because she said she couldn't see things clearly. Her parents got worried and took her to the doctor. She read everything wrong on the vision test. Everyone seemed convinced that she needed glasses. But the doctor was a little concerned because the tests indicated she needed really thick glasses, and usually that wasn't the case unless there was a family history of vision issues. Her parents both had 20/20 vision and her sister only had astigmatism. They all realized she was faking it. So the doctor told her parents in front of her that she'd need some pretty intense eye surgery so she'd be able to see without glasses. They even wheeled in a machine to make it convincing to say they could do the surgery right then and there. She freaked out, confessed to faking it all, and started to cry. She got grounded for a while. When I was a kid, I would plan my sick days way ahead of time. Had an old thermos that I would pour leftover milk, meat, whatever, leave it on the windowsill in my bedroom just letting it fester for a month. Of course the thermos was closed so no smells escaped. I set an alarm for the middle of the night, dumped the contents of the thermos on my rug, and ran in to tell my dad I was throwing up and so sick. However, this thermos monstrosity filled the entire condo up with horrible smells and both me and my dad ended up puking into the tub at the same time every time we tried to clean up the rug. He had to take the day off work too. Needless to say, I never pulled that again. Not a doctor, but worked in healthcare for nearly 20 years. While taking a break from the ICU, due to it being emotionally draining, I worked in home health for a bit. I had a patient who clearly had Munchausen syndrome. On a daily basis she would call her insurance to see what things would be covered if she was diagnosed with this or that. She called her doctor's office an average of 5x during my shift with her. She would report all kinds of non-real symptoms. She pestered the doctors into do exploitive laparoscopic surgery. Of course nothing was found. One day I walked in and she was rubbing her incisions with rotten cabbage trying to get it infected. She wasn't seeking pain meds, except to sell. Really she was just as happy with antibiotics or stool softeners, anything, as long as they wrote her a prescription, and she got to go to the pharmacy, where she did a whole song and dance for them too, claiming allergies and reactions. She always increased the exaggeration of her story too. One time she fluttered her eyes, after making sure I was looking, and said she lost consciousness in that half a second. She called the doctor and claimed she lost consciousness for 5 minutes. She called the insurance and claimed it was 10 minutes. She called the pharmacy and claimed it was 30 minutes. Then she called 911 and told them she woke up on the floor after losing consciousness for 4 hours. The worst thing about her was she was a mom. Her son was 28 at the time, and by all the stories of his childhood illnesses and all her saying how he is severely disabled, I knew she basically fucked up his childhood with Munchausen by proxy. She portrayed him as being severely disabled and that's why he would never find a wife. I met him. He was healthy and of average intelligence. He wasn't looking for a wife. He was gay, but she refused to accept that. Working with her was so miserable that I took a couple years off from any and all healthcare after that.